The CBS game of the week, 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central kickoff from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Bama a 17-point favorite in what we called in the preseason the game of the year in the SEC West. That is Texas A&M at Alabama. Now, we do things a little bit different when we have big favorites, and we're going to break down a game here. We don't just do a normal shot-for-shot breakdown. We acknowledge that Alabama's favored. They're favored for a reason. At the end of this preview, Colin's going to show you our game capsule where we juxtapose the Vegas line to our line. So we'll do that in just a few minutes. But we acknowledge Bama's a big favorite for a reason. So we're not going to necessarily lay out, okay, here's who we think is going to win the game. It's pretty easy to figure out there. But what we do is we say, could an upset happen? And so theoretically, 17-point dog, crazier things have happened just in the last week alone. So yeah, I guess Texas A&M could pull an upset. What we do in the preview briefly is we try and lay out the path. How could they potentially pull that off? And to be honest with you, there are probably a few ways you think you could go. Let's go down these roads to varying degrees, you and I both. So some coaches, you may think to yourself, some coaches can spring a trap on you, right? Some coaches are very, very unpredictable. And some quarterbacks you can rely on to just have the game of their life. Think Stephen Garcia against Alabama in 2010. Think, for that matter, Steve Spurrier, the head coach of that South Carolina team in 2010. Point being, those are examples of coaches and or quarterbacks who could just in one afternoon have the game of their life. Does Jimbo Fisher strike you as that man? Does Kellen Mond strike you as that quarterback? Because I got to be honest, my answers are no and no. So again, crazier things have happened, but I don't see that route being anything other than a dead end. So let's find another path. What about this path? Well, we held back versus Vanderbilt. This has got to be your hope if you're an A&M fan. Turnovers were a big deal in this game. It was kind of a rare occurrence, but you got to scan a message board, you got to listen to a talk radio show, and you got to listen for about 5 minutes in a game like they had against Vanderbilt where they won by 5. I think they were favored by 30, they won by 5. You got to listen for about 5 minutes or scan for about 5 minutes to find someone who is going to suggest to you, well, we probably just didn't show everything. We probably held something back. Well, I don't think that's true. I think that rarely happens to the degree that fans think it happens. If you believe that there is a head coach of any seasoning walking up and down a sideline in a conference game that's a one-possession game in the second half, and he's going, that one would probably work, but I want to save that one. No, we're not going to show that personnel package. No. That's how you end up sitting in the stands saying such nonsense. No, they do what it takes to win the game. But let me humor you for a second. If that were true, do you honestly think there's anything about Jimbo Fisher and Kellen Mond's capabilities offensively, if they've shown it or not, that Nick Saban and that offensive staff or defensive staff don't know about? Do you really think that? Nick Saban, at this point, probably knows Jimbo Fisher well than some of his relatives. Guy knows every tendency. Guy knows everything they've ever done, everything they're probably capable of. He could probably call their offense for them, and he's not even an offensive guy. They got some sweet masks at Alabama, though. Colin, we need to get us some of them. We may wear them on the air. So I'm going to shoot that one down. Let's go the third route. The third ray of hope is that, maybe defensively, A&M can take something away. You know, you take away an explosive passing game, force them to beat you on the ground. You take away the star running back, you force them to beat you through the air. We're going to talk about that a lot more in the Auburn-Georgia preview in just a second. What do you take away from Alabama? Because this goes back to what I said about Alabama. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more down the road, too. This goes back to what I said following last week's game. Some Bama fans actually complained. I loved what they showed offensively, because what they showed is you can try and take away whatever you want to. They have the makings of a premier running game, and they also have the makings of a very efficient and explosive enough passing game. Now, this is not a situation where it's a passing game where they got a noodle-arm quarterback, but he's good enough to move the chains and he's good enough to put together 12 or 14 play drives. No, they can burn you in 2 or 3 plays. They got guys like Devontae Smith. They got guys like Jalen Waddle and Mechie. They got those guys. And they got a quarterback that's got a plenty good enough arm. Had Tua Tagovailoa not ever come along in this program, you'd look at Mac Jones a lot differently. And you'd say, man, that's one of the best quarterbacks they've had. He is. He's not quite Tagovailoa, but then again, I don't think they want this offense to be molded like it was over the past couple of years. Because you know what I think Nick Saban wants the ability to do? I think he wants the ability to trot out 340-pound offensive linemen and just lean on you. And he looks across the field and he thinks, honestly, if you can stand up to this for 4 quarters, you deserve to win. I don't think you can. And he and I are speaking congruently now because I don't think they can either. So what is the remaining option? Well, the remaining option here is, well, maybe A&M can pop them 10, 14 points and they can tilt the game early. I guess they could. They did it last year. They scored on them, I think, the opening drive last year. I was at that game. It feels so weird talking about games you were on the field for. That's been a long time. Listen, if you think it's going to happen, that's wonderful. I think it's more likely to occur the other way. I think it's more likely that Alabama pops them early. I think they'll be very aggressive. Will the Alabama Crimson Tide, their passing game early like they were this last week, and they pop A&M for a few points early, because what does that do? Obviously, what that forces A&M to do is throw the ball to win the game. And if you've watched this series recently, throwing the ball to win the game is not necessarily where you want to find yourself if you're A&M and you are Kellen Mond. So I'm going to show you what our game capsule has here, and I promise you, I try and find the path. I couldn't really find the path for the upset here, outside of a freakish -4, -5 turnover type deal. Colin will show the people what the Vegas line is, and then we'll show you what the late kick line is. And a reminder, we generate our own number here. So we simulate a game 1,000 times. What do we think the average final score would be? So the game capsule is as such. For those of you listening on the podcast, Colin's showing it to you right now. Vegas has this thing right around 17. That's the number currently that is bettable at most shops. Alabama favored by 17. We're a little bit north of that. We got Bama -19. And that's about what I expect here. Sometimes there's not much skill in predicting final scores. Anywhere from the 38 to 45 point range for Bama, anywhere from the 13 to 20 point range for A&M, that's kind of what I expect this to be at. I don't think anyone's getting shut out, but here's the thing. That may make it look like we don't have a lot of respect for A&M. No, I think that's the second best overall roster in the SEC West right now. So that is competitive as it relates to what the rest of the SEC West we think will present to Alabama. Now, you could argue that whole roster point, but this is not a bad team. A&M's actually a very good team. It's just you can't be very good, especially if you're only very good at quarterback or good to very good. You don't stand a very good chance of beating Alabama.